You know, when you look at a modern Formula One car, your eyes go straight to the obvious stuff, right? That huge front wing, the massive rear wing, they look like they're doing all the work, generating all that insane grip. But what if I told you the single most powerful aerodynamic tool on the entire car is one you can't even see?
So, if it's not those giant wings we all see on TV, where does the real magic happen? What's the secret that lets these cars corner at speeds that just seem to defy the laws of physics? Well, the answer is hidden right under the driver's seat.
All right, get ready for this because this number is just staggering. 60%. That's not a typo. Nearly 60% of all the force pinning the car to the track comes from the floor. It's no exaggeration to say the floor is the true hidden giant of F1 aerodynamics.
Now, this whole principle is called ground effect, and it has completely defined this entire era of Formula One since 2022. So today, we're going to go underneath the most advanced race cars on the planet to really understand how this hidden giant works its magic.
So how on earth can a piece of carbon fiber underneath the car create so much force? Well, it's not magic, it's just really, really cool physics. It's all about turning the floor into one massive suction device that literally pulls the car down onto the asphalt.
The core scientific principle here is something called the Venturi Effect. Just picture air flowing through a pipe. If that pipe suddenly gets narrower, all that air has to speed up to squeeze through the smaller space. And a fundamental rule of physics says that when the speed of air goes up, its pressure drops. And that right there, that's the key to everything.
So here's how they apply that to the car. In F1, the track itself basically becomes one side of that pipe. The car's floor has these huge tunnels that funnel the air underneath. At a certain point called the throat, the floor dips closer to the ground, squeezing that air and forcing it to accelerate like crazy. And boom, that's what creates an incredibly powerful low-pressure zone.
And this is where it all comes together. You now have this super low-pressure air under the car, but you still have normal atmospheric pressure pushing down from above it. That massive difference in pressure creates a colossal force. That is, for all intents and purposes, crushing the car into the track. That's where all that unbelievable grip comes from.
Okay, so that probably raises a pretty logical question, right? If the real magic happens in that tiny, narrow gap, why are these floors so enormous? And why do the edges look so ridiculously complicated? Well, the answer is all about protecting that precious low-pressure zone.
See, that vacuum only works if you can stop the normal high-pressure air from the sides of the car from leaking in and ruining the whole effect. Back in the day, teams used actual physical skirts that scraped along the ground to create a seal. Of course, those were banned for being pretty dangerous. So today's engineers had to get way, way smarter.
And their solution is absolutely brilliant. They use all those complicated-looking edges and flicks on the floor to generate these powerful spinning spirals of air called vortices. These vortices act like an aerodynamic skirt. It's an invisible wall of air that seals the sides of the floor, protecting that low-pressure vacuum underneath. That's why every little detail on that floor edge is so critical.
So, why go through all this trouble? Why did Formula One completely change its entire philosophy? Well, believe it or not, it wasn't just about making the cars faster. It was about fixing a huge problem that was actually hurting the sport itself, the fact that cars just couldn't race each other closely. The old cars, the ones that relied so heavily on their wings, created this massive wake of turbulent, messy air behind them. We call it dirty air. So whenever a car tried to get close enough to overtake, its own wings would suddenly stop working in that chaotic airflow. They'd lose grip and have to back off. It made close racing almost impossible.
But when you compare the old way with the new way, the genius of these rules becomes so clear. Ground effect downforce from the floor is way less sensitive to that dirty air. It's also more efficient. It creates less drag. And the result? It's simple. Cars can follow each other much, much closer through the corners. And that leads directly to more chances to overtake and just flat-out better racing.
But it wasn't a perfect fix. This radical shift came with a pretty big catch. A very visible and very, very bouncy trade-off that engineers have been battling ever since.
And that, of course, is porpoising. Because the floor is so powerful and so sensitive to its height off the ground, the vacuum can literally suck the car down so low that the airflow underneath chokes or stalls. In that instant, all the suction is lost. The car's suspension springs it back up, the airflow reattaches, and the whole violent cycle starts all over again.
But here's the thing. Even with a wild challenge like porpoising, you just can't argue with the results. This shift to massive ground effect floors has been a monumental success.
I mean, they're responsible for about 60% of the car's downforce. They've reduced that dirty air problem, which allows for incredible wheel-to-wheel action, and they've helped create the fastest cars in the entire history of Formula One.
So next time you're watching a Grand Prix and you see a car just slice through a high-speed corner like it's glued to the road, don't just look at the wings. Remember that the real, invisible force making that happen is being generated right underneath by the hidden giant of Formula One.
It leaves you with a pretty fascinating thought, doesn't it? For decades, all the focus was on the air flowing over the car. Now, it's all about the air flowing under it. If the engineers have managed to harness this much power from the floor in just a few short years, what incredible innovations are they going to unlock next?